Welcome to this meeting of the South Burlington School Board. We're going to begin just by reviewing our agenda because we have some quick adjustments to make. We will not take up the subject of the school district calendar tonight. Not ready to do that. And with respect to the consent agenda, we have an addition to the consent agenda, which is the retirement of Barbara Lawrence, a full-time teacher at the Orchard School. The next item on our agenda is is comments from the public regarding items that are not otherwise on the agenda. So if the matter that brings you here this evening is already on the agenda, this is not the time for it. If it's not on the agenda, that's what we're soliciting right now. Are there any comments concerning matters that are not on the agenda? I don't see any. Okay. That takes us to the subject of the Howard Center's methadone clinic permit. And is there an update on that subject from the superintendent?
Yes, not a lot new. Just one addition is that there is a status conference that has been scheduled for the end of this month. And a status conference, again, my understanding is really the environmental court judge is working to schedule dates and information. So that has been set. There's been no other information shared at this point. So that's all I have.
Thank you. That takes us to the superintendent's report. I understand that you want to begin with an introduction.
I do. It's my pleasure to welcome to this meeting a new assistant principal here at the middle school by the name of Paul Yoon. Welcome, Paul. Glad to have you here. He made a trip up, probably a little snowy conditions, but all well-traveled. And I'd like to ask Karsten just to give you a little bit of an update board. As you know, you, under the consent agenda, had the opportunity to hear the name, but I'd like to ask Karsten to do a little bit more. Thank you, Karsten.
Yeah, thank you, and excuse my voice, I'm just overcoming a cold right now, but I want to welcome, well, thank you, sir. That's nice of you. I would also like to welcome Paul. Paul currently is assistant principal at the High School of Commerce in Springfield, which we actually did visit. He was previously an intern at Fenway High School. He is a Harvard graduate and has also taught at Boston College before, and he's formerly a social studies teacher. So he certainly comes to us with a lot of background and experience. We did have a screening committee. I believe the board has been updated on the process. It was a fairly extensive process. We had 18 people on the screening committee. Had basically, educators, special educators, both of our counselors, a lot of the support staff, the school nurse, administrative assistants, parents, and then also other administrators that joined me there on the screening committee. It was quite an extensive process. We tried to mirror a similar process that was used for Holly 2 years ago, and for me, obviously, when I was hired 3 years ago, and included staff, parents, students, and the administrative colleagues in the interview process, gave them an opportunity to provide feedback, online feedback, actually through a Google Docs document, and then took all that into consideration as a screening committee to come to our finalists. And we also did conduct 3 site visitations. So, congratulations to Paul. Out of 78 applicants, he is our finalist, so I think he can pat himself on the back. We're very excited. I think Paul will be a great addition to what we have already been doing, some of the transformational initiatives that we are undergoing to do what's best for kids, essentially. So I think Paul will bring a lot of expertise to the job, and he's very excited. He has some personal ties to the community. I understand he got married actually in the islands here. So he's excited to come here. you want to maybe add to that?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Paul. You haven't already met me. I'm very excited to be here this evening, and I'm very excited to join this wonderful school community. I've been really overwhelmed, actually, by the enthusiastic responses that I've received via email and in person from many, many members of the community. As Karsten just mentioned, my mother-in-law teaches here in the district. My wife and I were married here. We've been thinking about this and dreaming about this for a long time. So we're just very excited that this is really coming together for us now. I can't wait until July 1st. I can't wait to join Karsten here at the middle school, and I can't wait to start, continuing a lot of this transformational work that's happened in the district and in this region. So thank you again for inviting me, for welcoming here, and I hope and really expect great things from here on out.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. And on behalf of my colleagues on the board and in our role really as the representatives of the broader community, congratulations and welcome to South Burlington. And we look forward to having you here as of July 1st and hope for many years and a long and we hope rewarding career for you and an opportunity we hope to do a lot of good in our community. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karsten.
So I said he could stay around,
Yeah.
you know, and continue the meeting, although I know he has other things to attend to, so I have,
Please don't feel obligated, but do feel welcome.
yes. So thanks again, Paul.
And with that, you want to move on to city center mapping?
Yes, and actually, Martin and I had a discussion about this and felt it would be appropriate. It isn't in your packet. I do have a larger map. I don't have it up on the screen, but basically what I wanted to share with you is just, and I think Martin will add, and I think it would be helpful to also understand the difference between form-based code and use-based code, and I'll ask Martin maybe just to give a little update on that. But basically what we wanted to provide you is that there are some things happening in this process whereby road structures are starting to emerge in draft form, cutting through part of Central School. And without just being silent, again, Martin has been very active with the Form-Based Code Committee and felt it would be appropriate to have a discussion and to begin to just think about what you might like to do with this. So with that said, let me just allow Martin just to define those two things first, and then maybe take a couple quick questions from the board. And I don't expect to spend a lot of time on this, but just wanted to get it out.
Sure. There are three aspects of what we've been looking at in the form-based coding. There's probably more than that, but three that I'll point out. One is connectivity of roads through the city center area, which is going to be very important and pertinent, and I'll get into that in a moment. The second is the street topography, I think is the terminology, what the streets are going to look like. A little less important for us so long as the buses can get to and from the school. So I'm kind of keeping my eye on that as a representative of the district. And then the third is the form-based coding. And let me start with that real quick because I know there's a question about what that is. Very basically, form-based coding explains what a street will look like and what the buildings that are on the street will look like and the density of the buildings. There's something called Zone 5. You see on your maps T5, and that's the most dense type of area, and it really defines what the frontage of the buildings are, how high they're supposed to be, how much windows they're supposed to be on there, how much space between doors, etc. It does not define what the uses are supposed to be, except that it's really looking for retail or restaurants on the first level when you're looking at a T5. It goes out to different or less dense. T3 or T4 is less dense, but it's commercial, and it can be residential as well, frankly. And it keeps on going to a less dense T3 and T2 and T1. Any event, the point, I think the important point for us, and what I also have been watching for is, okay, it doesn't really say anything about uses. So as long as you have your big window and your doors a certain amount apart, usually that's retail. What's behind there, it could be an abattoir, can it be a funeral home, can it be, industry? It really doesn't say anything about that, except to the extent that the committee or that it's written into the form. Here's what's not allowed. And that's kind of different from your standard zoning. A zone will usually say, here are the uses that you can put in there, and it can be broadly interpreted, such as a medical office, which we're running into problems with the methadone clinic. So I'm watching that very carefully. I've already expressed in the context of the committee that when we get to the appropriate point, we want to make sure that there are certain uses that are not, or that are prohibited within a certain distance of the school. A methadone clinic would be one that I would propose to them. So as far as the streets, one of the streets that they're trying to have a little more connectivity, and actually the map that was provided on the back of the superintendent doesn't fully show how there's a road that actually will go all the way out to Dorset, an extra road. And it's an extra connector that's actually coming from Williston, connecting all the way through to Dorset. They're trying to have that kind of connectivity, which will take pressure off of certain points. The key to us, obviously, is that this is central school property. And there's a road here, which has not been finalized by any stretch. The reason that this was even put in there is that the city, in fact, has a right-of-way. That is the city's right-of-way over that piece of property. My view is, rather than argue over right-of-way, let's figure out what's, if the road really makes sense there, which they're telling me it does, and how best to put it there. But just to make clear, with respect to Central School, this area is not really used except for Doug Day's cross-country skiing, is my understanding. These are woods, and that's what you see in the drawing here. These are woods through here, and the playground is really this area. So my view has been, and what I would want to, at least at this point, is understand from the board whether we oppose having that road there, or if I'm able to say that our initial impression is that we will work with you, as long as there's a buffer of the woods, as long as there's appropriate fence, if that makes sense, as long as our concerns over safety are taken into account, then perhaps that this makes sense. What we do with that little bit that's between the school and the road, they I think have it planned as a green space. But we may want to talk further down the road if we want to suggest to them that they zone this for more intensive use, so that sometime down the road, perhaps the district can sell that property. But right now, the main issue is this road. And I'm looking for some feedback as far as what I should be saying to the committee.
Where's Heinsberg Road based on that right-of-way?
It's further over. It'd be right.
So there's a bunch of Market Street after that right-of-way? Is that on the edge, like by the?
This is the right of way. This is Al's Fries. This is, I don't think this is a road. This is not the part. I
Sorry.
can show you. No, that's fine. There's one other part I wanted to mention really quickly for you.
You just wanted me to hold this big thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Get my
hold
chin down here and.
This is not a road right now. This would be, it would be a new pathway, perhaps a bike path, I think is what a rec path is what they've talked about.
Okay.
Again, none of this is really finalized yet. This is Al's Fries right here, essentially. So this is the street that goes along, Al's Fries and what's the?
Yeah,
Midas-
where the Midas
The
muffler
Midas
place
shop,
is.
right.
Yeah.
So, but there's one other thing. They had a rec path going right along the back of the school, and I've told them, actually a couple times, that this makes no sense. I don't know that they've walked that space. It just doesn't make any sense. I've told them that that's not appropriate.
Where does that hit Dorset, that new connector road, just
The
for my?
connector road right by the Trader Joe's, I think. That's not there yet. The healthy living.
Let me ask a question, just to improve my understanding, hopefully the other board members' understanding. I get that they want this, but this is the part where the existing right-of-way is?
Correct.
Is this little section here part that they intend to use?
No,
as
no,
well?
I just was
Those are our
designating that
doodling. Okay.
that's
Our
where
doodling.
there are woods.
Okay.
That's where there's this buffer between the rec path, and there's a fence, and then there's woods, and then there's a proposed rec path. The same thing with the road, so.
mean, I think it would be good, I put it on here just because it was new information in my report. I think it would be good that, you know, this is going to continue to take on some additional motion, and, you know, it would be important, I think we get it on the agenda and have a little bit more time maybe to talk about now and long-term view here, so.
So you don't need feedback tonight, or do you
Well,
want some
the-
feedback
Yeah,
tonight?
I do, because as early as the next meeting, which is tomorrow, they
you
may
do.
be trying to finalize, when I say finalize, it's you know, not really finalized, because the whole plan has to be voted on by the committee, I think, eventually, and definitely the city council has to vote on it before it really becomes final. But they're trying to nail down where are the roads gonna be. And the next item that they're trying to nail down is what are the roads gonna look like, and then what are the buildings gonna look like, so.
I mean, my gut feeling on this is you're asking the right questions, which are really safety-related issues. Is there a need for fencing, you know, some kind of visual buffer, whether it's landscaping or, you know, existing woods, that kind of thing? I mean, those are the obvious ones I can think of, but your question that you opened with was, you know, do we think we can work with the city on this segment of the school land? And I mean, I don't see a reason why we couldn't on that piece. So I know it well, and it's a really, you know, not well-used part of the central property.
Anybody have a different view than that? Okay.
Can I ask one, I'm glad to hear, Martin, too, you're asking about the use piece as well. The other thing I didn't hear you say, which might be a little bit hard to predict at this stage, but will traffic flow patterns, I mean, I think we are learning a lot with the, you know, the potential location of the clinic placement, but there are potentially businesses that would fit the form-based code, but some may see, you know, 2 cars an hour, and some may see 40. And is there any addressing of that traffic density piece?
Yeah, there is. I can't give you any specifics on it, but
Okay.
that is part of it. And a big push, as I mentioned before, is they are trying to have more connectivity so that there's more options, so there's not the backlog at the corner of Dorset and Williston, for instance. A Market Street is going to be paved as part of this, or even before this, which is going to increase traffic from what I understand, from what I've been told. But I don't know the details. I mean, one thing I've been trying to certainly look for is, and this is not just me, this is the other committee members as well, is they want to have a safe way for kids to walk or bike to school from the neighborhoods that are surrounding there. And so that's obviously a concern that I have, but I haven't had to push that one from the school district's perspective, because it's understood by everybody there.
Do they have any reliable method of making a prediction about what the effect of this increased connectivity will be with respect to the traffic?
They may, I don't know.
I mean, I know that the
It would
traffic,
concern me a lot if what we had was the kind of traffic, or even half the traffic you have on Williston Road, running now behind the school and up Market Street. That would not be good for us.
Probably not.
you know, I don't know the specifics, but I know that, you know, in the early side of some of the form-based code discussions, you know, the traffic engineers, and part of the delineation of the different levels of Ts are factored into this, as well as the current activity on the surrounding roads, Dorset, Williston Road, Heinsberg Road, so that does factor into their study. I'm not saying whether, you
Well,
know, that proves to be,
no,
makes
there's a
sense or
big-
not, but that's the methodology that's used around this.
Well, and a big part of it is I mentioned the road topology, and one of the things that they're looking at, and was, I think, up for comment until yesterday, was how Market Street will look. And if you have just 2 lanes, you have 25 mile per hour maximum, you have the pedestrian walk on the side, that's naturally gonna make it less of a flow-through road. I mean, they could make it so it's a way to get from point A to point B. The objective of Market Street is that it is a destination. So that lessens my concern that there's gonna be an increase of negative traffic in that area, so at least that's the theory.
Anything else? Thank you, Martin. And David, that takes us to the audit.
Yes, I'll let John kind of update you on the audit. We just wanted to update you on kind of where we are.
At the last meeting, we talked about the audit and the nutritional services deficit and
Yeah.
from an accounting standpoint, how that should be handled. So we went to the Agency of Education, the Education Finance Manager, and asked him specifically, showed him our financials, asked him specifically for guidance, both from the law and from accounting. So we have a preliminary answer, but there's a couple things I want to tweak, so we'll have a full report next time.
All right, thank you. And just on the audit, the other thing I wanted to mention is that although it was a clean audit, there were some minor suggestions in the management letter, and I think those should be scheduled. The board should take those up and decide what to do with those suggestions.
Yep.
So
It's fine.
that needs to be on a future agenda.
Okay.
For sure. All right. And that takes us to administrative reports. And the first one is the Career Development Center report, and we have a written report. Is there also an oral presentation?
I think we do have a short little
Okay.
blurb, and although I wasn't expecting Pat
I
to
see
be
Mr.
here
Burke.
tonight, he was going to be over at the high school.
Say
He's
short?
going back
Yeah.
over, yeah. So, this is, I think, a nice opportunity for the board just to be updated on the Career Development Center and a little bit about the program and a little update. So without further ado, I know it's a short little snippet, I'll turn it over to Pat and let him take it.
Well, I
from
figure I should say something since everybody's clearly here for the Career Development Center.
Right.
Board. I mean, thanks for coming, folks. Is Emily here?
I am.
Oh, hey, Emily. Emily actually is here. She has worked with our students through the CDC and also when she was at South Burlington graduate. It had some intersect with the CDC. So, and Emily also has had some intersect with CDC. So they're really the experts, but just for the folks who are here, the CDC has been around for 15 years. It is it's way ahead of its time in terms of giving our high school students academic credit for their experiences in the field. And so there's a lot of work being done right now in high schools around the country, so-called transformation that talks about proficiency-based and allowing for different pathways for students to accrue credits towards graduation. At SBHS, we've been doing that for over 15 years, and mostly by way of the Career Development Center, which is led by Nancy LeVarnway, who is just an absolute gift to the district. She is only part-time, which is a shock to many people when they hear that because she's fairly omnipresent in both the community and in the high school. And so in her part-time role, she, every year she has been here, has been able to increase the number of students at South Burlington who engage in either, there are a couple different ways that you can intersect with CDC. It is a clearinghouse for volunteer opportunities, so everything from senior citizen who needs to have their lawn raked in this, somebody tips me off, I give it to Nancy, she knows the kids that are going to go do it, they go do it. Those kind of one-shot volunteer opportunities where somebody needs help, all the way to coordinating major activities with our large community service clubs like Coalition for Community Service, and South Burlington High School is kind of like traditionally operates as the, what's it called, holiday time, the train.
Polar Express.
Polar Express, thanks. So if you've ever taken your children to Polar Express, the Elks, those are ours. And so there are a number of different agencies. The Vermont City Marathon's another example that relies on us for large groups of kind of those one-shot volunteer opportunities. But then also Nancy has a well-articulated opportunities for students to engage in career exploration. She's very supportive of taking even the most reluctant student and helping them find ways to engage with career exploration that extend, beyond filling in the pencil and paper survey or taking the internet survey that tells you that you're going to be a cab driver or a doctor. And so what she'll do is she'll help students go out and do informational interviews. She'll help students go out and do job shadows. She'll help students go out and do short-term internships, and then she'll have students who go out and do full-blown long-term internships. And we give variable credit for different types of experiences for students, academic credit. So, so you can see how that articulation kind of goes up, where a student may just start interviewing an architect, then they may do a job shadow, then they may do a week-long summer internship, then they may end up with a full-blown internship that they have senior year every gray day at the end of the day, or twice a week, or every weekend, or something like that. So that's what the Career Development Center does, but I'm going to ask Emily to talk about specifically how you intersected with the Career Development Center when you were here, and also now that you're in the community, how you've kind of given back, I guess.
Yeah.
So, Emily, do it.
Where do you want me?
Class
to
of, come on.
Okay.
Class of-
2007.
Class of 2007.
Yeah.
Very good.
So hi everyone. My name is Emily DeWitt, and I am a product of the South Burlington school system. I am the outreach coordinator at Women Helping Battered Women, so I coordinate all education and outreach events as well as recruitment of interns and volunteers. Let me backtrack a little bit. When I was at South Burlington High School, I was involved in the Career Development Center specifically to meet my requirement for health class. So I reluctantly went in and found a volunteer opportunity, which needed to be short-term, but I made it last over 2 years. I was a mentor at Central School. So when I took the position at Women Helping Battered Women, I realized that we didn't have any high school interns, we didn't have any high school volunteers, and I knew how important that was from being at South Burlington High School. So I reached out to Nancy LaVarnway. She invited me to the Coalition for Community Service meeting back in September. And I've been on the agenda ever since, reaching out to high schoolers, trying to recruit some interns, and they have been fabulous. We've had a clothing drive, and most recently we had a bake sale to benefit a new program that we're going to start offering at Women Helping Battered Women, which is a teen resource room. We didn't know a lot about teens and their needs, specifically with teen dating violence, but also being a child growing up in a home with domestic abuse. So working with the teens through the Coalition for Community Service, we started a teen room so teens can feel more comfortable when they come to our emergency shelter. And now we're working into a peer advocacy program that we just recently started, where teens can go through our training and become certified crisis workers and can provide peer support to anybody that they know that might be experiencing teen dating violence or intimate partner violence. So a lot of great work going on.
Well, thank you very much for the information.
Yeah.
And thank you also for working with kids in the school here. We
not a
appreciate that.
problem.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Anything you want to add about your experience at CDC?
I've been an intern in the CDC for since freshman year, and it definitely has influence in my involvement with the community. I'm now president of Coalition for Community Service, which is co-advised by Ms. Randall Mullins and Nancy LaVarnway. And it's the largest club in our school, and we've done a lot of hours with that and getting involved in the community. And I'm also doing a senior challenge with Ms. LaVarnway, and there's only 2 seniors this year that are doing it, where I do an independent project that isn't provided by the school, and I have a mentor that I work with, and that's been a really good opportunity for me to see some other things that I can do in the community and with my future. So it's been a great experience.
Just questions
Any
or comments? Yeah, David, you want to?
Well, again, those of you who don't know, I don't think it's always safe to say, but her office is located in the community library, and school library. And, her door is always open and always hopping, I think, with a lot of things. So many good things going on, some of which were highlighted tonight. I think also one big part that's upcoming, I'm not exactly sure, I should know of the date, the expo, Job Expo actually is coming up. Anybody?
April
April 2nd. So that's a huge event, and we have an awful lot of participation coming from the community, and a pretty big circumference, actually. And, from my perspective, again, all of the positive things that you've just heard about the engagement for students and the validation of the work, but I think also is an important component in which we've really been working hard on administratively is how do we support this type of thinking. And for the administrative team, we traveled on Tuesday to Champlain College and met with their administrative staff and really, again, talking about the partnerships that are needed to really continue to create the engagement that we think is really needed, as Patrick said, kind of in the transformational, and Karsten also around the kind of transformational movement that we're looking at. So a lot of great things happening, and you know, I don't know what specific questions the board might have, Rich, for any of those that are here tonight to answer those.
If there were questions, please feel free. I've participated in the Career Day program at least on one occasion in the past, and so know something about it myself from that, and it's
And
great.
been and a participant of the Polar Express,
Well,
along
there
with
is
some of
that
those
too,
elves,
indeed,
yes.
Yes, yes, indeed. A former very tall elf who's been graduated to conduct.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So do you have some sense of what percentage of our students utilize the CDC?
We do. Nancy does a great job at collecting data, and all of her annual reports are available on the CDC website, and you can track back and see how, both as a percentage of the whole and in aggregate, the number of students intersecting with the CDC is continuing to increase. She's really good at collecting data, so it's all there.
And Nancy would have been here. She's actually teaching a course at my alma mater, Norwich University, and she sends her regards. She wishes she could be here, so.
One more thing about Nancy, just so folks know, she was just appointed by the governor to chair the Vermont's Commission on Women, which is a pretty exciting appointment for her, and that's going to become really public soon when she is officially appointed. But we were just made aware of that this week, and you know, obviously that's great for South Burlington. We're really excited about that. It's great for the state of Vermont because she's an amazing woman. So it's,
I did include that, board members, in your announcement packet, but thank you, Pat, for highlighting that. That's very nice.
All right, there are no other board questions. Thank you very much, Pat, and
Back to
all
the
for
climate
your
committee.
presentation. We appreciate the information.
you got this one right.
And that takes us to the subject of nutrition services, and I want to just introduce that subject by making a comment, which is that there's been an impression created, and I guess perhaps it's because there was a preliminary proposal by the Abbey Group to contract out the service, that the board is somehow facing two choices between keeping the program within and contracting out to the Abbey. That is certainly not the case. In fact, if we were going to contract out, there would have to be a formal request for proposal process and an opportunity for competitive bidding, and none of that's occurred. It's really more something that has occurred, I think, because the Abbey wanted to do it and because it's a useful point of comparison and information for us. There is a serious issue to deal with respect to nutritional services, and that is that over the years, the program, which was set up to be an enterprise fund, which means it was intended to pay for itself, has failed to do that. And however we proceed, there has to be a situation in which we come to a place where we're in control of the finances that surround the program. We can't just write a blank check and say, well, whatever it costs, we'll just pay it. And there may be some other important decisions that the board has to make at some point in time, but to think about this in a sort of either or door A or door B sense is not where the board is. We could come to that someday. I don't mean to say that anything is off limits, but that's not where the board is at this point in time. So I just want to be clear with people about that. If there is information that we have not heard before, and we have heard a lot about this, but I'm willing to hear more. If there's information that people want to share with us, we certainly would be willing to hear that.
I'd like to just maybe just provide a little
Yeah.
bit of highlight for the board,
Okay.
Rich. Again, I direct this to the board, and certainly I know interested folks are in the audience. First of all, a lot of you know that Wynn's not here tonight. He's been a very important part of the collection of the information and working with the internal and external groups. I guess I first want to thank the folks that are here representing both internal and external for all of their hard work. And I think I would like to just separately, because the day-in operations from the internal folks, I just would like the internal folks to stand up for a second. Those that are in the kitchens doing the work on a day-by-day basis. I know we have a few of you here, and just would like to recognize you for your hard work. So, and part of this is And those of you that know, Christine has spent, how many years, Christine? 20, how many? 25 years, progressing through our system. And really, again, when you think about the number of meals in which have been served to students over those years, it's pretty darn impressive. So, again, to both groups, I very much appreciate the work that you have done. I want to be really clear about the purpose, and again, anytime something goes forward to the board, I always have the opportunity to evaluate my actions as well. Again, I want to be clear about the desired state that I have for nutrition services, and that is to provide students nutritious meals that allow learning to be at its best. And I think that's a common shared objective from all. Again, it is important that it be accomplished by allocating resources that can be supported by our citizens, and I think that's also a critical component. Even though it's an enterprise fund, it still does need to be supported by our citizenry in all facets. Next step for me, again, this, as Rich identified, it's an internal function. It was only we did checking in on some of the external options, for instance, the Abbey. But I feel the next step, given the information that I've received, both internal and external, I desire nutritional services to continue to remain the enterprise fund within the South Burlington School District, with the following understandings I think are important, and I'm happy to take questions from the board on some of my understandings. To hire a director, to develop a financial plan that I think is critical on the move forward. I believe there's a need for some, what I'll say, more frequent information, and I'm going to say monthly financial statements that be provided to the school board from me around how we are moving forward. I believe it should be a 2-year period that we put in play, allowing for a plan to be implemented, monitored, and tweaked. Again, I think that is an important component as a new director comes in. They kind of understand the time frame for the view. And if at the end of a 2-year period, or if consistent monthly losses are happening on a regular basis before the 2-year period, I think a discussion needs to happen with the board from me around a variety of possible recommendations, and that could be to go out for a full RFP, to talk about subsidizing from the general fund an amount that continues to be the overage, or to do nothing. So again, I feel, from my perspective, the opportunity just to highlight this process and provide some directions from me on where I'm at, and certainly happy to answer any questions that the board might have about my desired next step.
David, I just have a question, and you provided some information in the packet about the piece of nutrition services that's nutrition education, that's not nutrition services, and my question was, can that be removed from nutrition services and put into the general fund? Because that's supporting direct work, that's nutrition education as it relates to student ends. Is that something that
Sure.
can be transferred? How does that work?
Well, first of all, again, the budget process, as you know, for next year, we're proud to say has been adopted by our citizenry. But certainly it can. We can make recommendations to take certain things that are currently being funded through the enterprise fund and make recommendations to pay it out of the general fund. I do believe that there's merit, and again, I want to be careful to the process, but I do believe there's merit in those things that have curricular connections that are really essential to the curriculum and the teaching of that. I do believe there's merit to have it come out of the general fund. I have to be careful here because I don't want to mix and match a lot of different things. We know that nutrition plays a major role in the education of children, so that the whole enterprise fund, I would not be supportive, of that being coming out of the
Right.
general fund. But that specific piece, I do feel there's merit there.
And I would think that something like that would be something we might see in the budget for next year as opposed to happening this year.
That's correct. That would be my
So-
recommendation. I'm not I really want to be sensitive, and I know John is a watchful eye for me in this area, but I do really not want to be making changes once the citizenry board have adopted a budget, passed a budget, and making changes. I think if we're going to do that, there's a period of time to do that and bring that forward.
So David, in a lot of our current curriculum, we teach these things about nutrition already. So, what about the overlap? And
Good question. You know, in some places, remember, it's not that we just teach it once here. There are, you know, ways in which we continue to talk about certain pieces, and that's in part, you know, what we believe good education to be, where you're taking things that you learn in one area and applying it to another. And we're continuing to be, needing to be knowledgeable about that. So, again, I think that's part of the look that, given, you know, the suggestions here that have come from all, is to really look at how we can embed that, support that in the right way. And it may be that we need those additional resources, or it may be that we're embedding it quite nicely and getting the results that we want. I know you have a question, Rich, in the back too. I don't know,
Yes.
so.
Please identify yourself.
I'm Rob Skiff, I'm a community member in South Burlington. Since you're not quite sure yet the audit of the nutritional program, do you have any sense of how big the deficit is? And if you're not, then isn't the discussion about how we handle that a little bit premature? We're not. Do you have any idea?
We do know what the deficit is. We can give you that number. John, what's
Okay.
the accrued deficit at this point?
$348,000.
You have that information.
Okay. So the question is just how to account for it?
No, the
Well,
question is,
the problem is that the audit has continued to show a continuing growing deficit year in and year out, as opposed to zeroing that number out at the end of a particular school budget year, and starting at a zero balance. And it's a question of how you want to look at it. If we thought that we were in a situation in which, for cyclical reasons, we had a small loss and one year we're going to pick it up the next year, you'd probably want to just carry it forward. But what we learned from a $347,000 loss is that we have a systemic deficit in the fund, and we need to find the structural source of that and attend to it.
What's your guess? Is it the federal subsidies not being paid?
No, we get paid our subsidies.
You know, but what's your sense of where that structural deficit is?
Well, you have anytime you're in a sort of business situation, you have a relationship between price and utilization. And, the relationship is not one that leads us to a zero balance. It leads us to a loss.
Sure. Well, I'll ask just one more question. Are we talking mainly, are we talking the ingredients, the food you're buying, or are we talking the salaries and the way in which the budget, what you're asking the nutritional services budget to support that may not necessarily be directly related to nutritional services?
Well, one thing that has changed over the years is that we have done a better job of allocating costs correctly. So there were some items that were at one time being carried in the general fund that related directly to really the benefits associated with people who were employed in the nutritional services division. And so I think that's probably where a lot of this deficit actually arises, but,
I think you're absolutely right. Again, I don't care to rehash really, I know that both the internal and the external group probably know all of this, but certainly, the federal mandates that have come down most recently, over time, we've migrated, as you said, Rich, those things that are currently part of the enterprise fund, we've actually made them whole. What we've also uncovered, and I think the board knows, is that in many other locations, that's not the trend. They're actually being subsidized out of the general fund. So when we did apples to apples, it actually made our program say, wow, yes, we're in a deficit, we're doing it in a different way, and we're articulating, and from my perspective, the right way. So all of those pieces, to include, the most important is the participation when a change is made. the time of the day. We actually restructured our start times. Those have effect on our benefits and salary. So all of those things, again, I'm not hitting all of them, that they all play into the situation at hand. And how we carry that deficit, how we pay that off, or how we move forward is in part what we opened up with tonight around the audit information that John's awaiting to provide the board some more guidance, so.
But I would say that from my perspective, the audit information really relates to history. The history is important in terms of understanding how we got where we are. But what's more important than how we got where we are is where we're going, and that's what we're really interested in. I think we are in a better position to make better choices if we understand the facts. And we understand the facts better than we did when I joined this board 12 years ago, at a time when many of the costs associated with nutritional services were sort of hidden in the general fund budget. So that's a good thing. It doesn't tell us the answer to the structural problem. Other questions and comments?
Just a couple of quick comments, David, on your recommendations. I think in the past meeting, there were several tactics that were identified working with some outside consultants on how to kind of improve efficiencies, cost, and quality right now within our program. So, I would characterize those, particularly those that don't require a lot of investment. There may be too many on the list, but I would hope that the internal team is really looking at some continuous improvement activities, and my guess is by implementing some of those that were identified, that there'll be the effect of kind of stemming the bleeding relative to the deficit, and we'll start to see that fairly quickly. And I appreciate your recommendation to kind of look at some monthly monitoring, because we'll hopefully see that. I think in terms of hiring a director, that makes a lot of sense to me. I would also say not only responsibility for the financial plan, but also identifying kind of what the priorities and goals should be for the district in strategic areas. And I know the board's been a little bit stymied with almost weighing in on areas that none of us have any expertise, but this is a good example where I think the director role, particularly if those roles and responsibilities are benchmarked against some other high-performing districts, even around the country, can kind of come in and say, for a district like South Burlington, over the next 5 years, you ought to look to be sourcing 15% of your ingredients locally. You should be looking at, I don't know what the right numbers are, but setting some goals off of which we can start to measure the quality of the program. And to Rich's point, you only can monitor what you're measuring. So I think we'll start to see some improvement there. I think your 2-year time period is very appropriate. I think it gives us some time to look at quarterly performance, but also to course correct along the way. And obviously, if we're not seeing any improvement, I think we're going to be faced with some other decisions. But I think what you've described kind of makes sense with the information we have right now. And I would concur with you, Rich. We know so much more about the fully burdened nutritional services plan today than we used to know, because we weren't seeing all of the components of that plan. And we are now.
Other comments?
Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Is there a need for action from the board on your part, David?
No, no, again, we are internal. I've just outlined, I think, because it's in a deficit issue, again, you hold me accountable to run it, but because it's a deficit, I felt like it was an appropriate conversation for us to have and to identify. And again, I extend my sincere gratitude to the internal and external groups in getting us to this place. With that said, we have been a district that has come from what I would say uncovering, and I don't want to make that in a negative way towards our own internal people, but the accountability of the service has been something we've uncovered and identified. So I don't think I need anything except for your questions that you've already given back to me. If I hear none other, then I'll take these questions, I'll integrate them into the next step and begin moving forward as I identified.
Anything else? Well, I just want to say that a lot of people have worked very hard over a very long time to improve nutritional services in this district. And it's a very important subject, and the board's well aware of that, and we are also aware of the fact that employees and members of our community, and some folks we've reached out to have worked hard to help us improve our program, and that's what we hope we will be successful in making it an even better program than it is today, and one that, if it can be done, is self-sustaining. And if it's not self-sustaining, we have some choices to make in the future. And we're in a position, because we know what it costs to run it, to make those choices in a conscious way. So I do appreciate the contribution that our employees and members of our community and people we've reached out to have made to improve this program, and we hope to be successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. That takes us to item 7 on our agenda, which is the Agency of Education Act 156.
Yes, and-
Transportation grant.
And so let me say this, board members,
Yep.
that you may have additional questions beyond what I can answer. Again, I own it, it's on the agenda. Wynn may want to be here to answer some of your more specific questions. I'm fine to table it. He would like action. In short, I do feel that this is, again, a grant that's available. I'll try to,
Yeah, why don't we take?
trying to be mindful of,
Yeah, let's
trying to move you guys along.
We'll be in recess for a minute or
Sorry,
two
Rich.
while we let people clear out. And I'll get some coffee.
Yeah.
All right. So that takes us to the transportation grant, and we understand that if we have more questions, we can table it, but Wynn is asking for action if we can do that.
If we can. And so, as you know, this is a multiple participation grant that involves, Winooski, you can see the districts that are listed there. And again, this is an area of interest of Wynn's. He's taking coursework in this area, but recognizing also the efficiencies that are so noted that could be beneficial to our district and others. And so I'm certainly supportive of the grant and the ideas for the trend towards cost efficiency and where it may lead us into other available options. I think it does allow for those more advanced options to come out, where course sharing, both technologically and go-to, I think, are important pieces, and deepening our discussion. Part of this is a little bit maybe ahead of the decisions. It's looking at infrastructure and hoping that the infrastructure provides the dialogue for the next step. So I want to pause there.
All right.
I think if you do have questions, and it leads to an actionable item at this point, then we can put it on to the third. I'll do my very best to either write the questions down or to answer them if I can. Does that sound okay, Rich?
Sounds fine to me, and the question is, are there questions? Comments?
Yeah, so I'm sorry because I missed the last discussion about this, but when I look at this, David, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to figure out how to transport kids from place to place before you have a plan in place about what the kids are gonna be doing, if the schedules are conducive to each other. It's sort of like, I just, the order doesn't make sense to me. And especially when we have this technology that we're investing in, why would we be transporting kids? Why wouldn't we be using the technology and keeping the kids where they are? I understand trying to get some efficiencies with teaching, and that makes sense to me, but I just don't understand the order. So maybe I just need a little explanation about that.
Yeah, and part of this work is to it's not exclusively transportation, but it's a melding of the two. It's about not necessarily going in all of the locations, but looking at, is there a mix of, 2 on-site visits and 3 classes virtual, based, utilizing the technology. So, but you're right, the schedule, the coordination of schedules, all of those things have not been done. So you're right that the idea is the hope that transportation will lead to these kinds of discussions that would allow for growth in these areas, is the premise of the grant and the uncovering, so.
Okay.
Dave, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's just, even with that, it doesn't
Yeah,
make a lot of
That's
sense
fine,
to me.
I'm writing the questions down, and
Okay.
Stuart, you know some about this, but not a lot, correct?
I mean,
Okay, so I don't want to exclude you if you know more.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. You're gonna exclude me. Okay. It's all good.
I guess I would just say, that everything has to start somewhere.
Yeah,
You could start at the other end of the problem, but you still have to look at all these components. So,
And, Rich, from my standpoint, starting somewhere is not a reason to spend $10,000 of somebody's money. Because by the time, I don't know what this is out of context of a more broadly defined project. So it could be 3 years before the technology component was evaluated, and another 2 years after that the actual learning opportunities that are either needed or desired are identified, and by that time, this data is old. So it would have to be repeated. I guess I share Julie's concern that, no pun intended, this is the bus before the cart before the horse, but I feel like this isn't giving us actionable data, and we haven't always, if I felt like there would be something of value that might come out of this that would move us down that continuum, it might be easier to rationalize, but I just don't,
You
I
have
don't
nothing really
see
to grab onto it to do that.
Well, it's not addressing the fundamental issue, and, and all the solutions to the issue could then be evaluated against what that desired end state is within Chittenden County. It could be, here's the desired end state, and then we'll marry up technology, we'll marry up transportation, we'll marry up staffing to that, and things I don't even know about, but it's bring to bear a number of different potential solutions to what already has been defined as either a need or a desired state across the student population. So,
It's good.
I would like to know, so other districts have signed on to this, so they're seeing some benefit to this, and I guess I would want to know more about why they want to do it.
I can't speak to, the evolution of the grant or where it's at or what's been collected. That's really a win
Okay.
thing. I don't think it's totally exclusive that everybody has to sign on or not.
But a number have, and I'm
A
just
number
curious.
have, but
yeah.
remember, they've given their say to sign on.
Right.
I don't know what level of next involvement will be there, again. I think there's enough questions. I would make the suggestion that you can take no action and put it back onto the third with questions answered and then get a more of an in-depth understanding of what is the plan, is there, or is there a plan, all of those types of things. It may be that those have been, are done and not provided to you, I don't know. Or you can direct me to just say, take an action and in an action of non-support, that you're not interested in moving on this at this time.
so just so that we understand the cost that the district would be called upon to bear, it's essentially $400, or is
No.
that right? Well, I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm saying donated time from the South Burlington Assistant Superintendent
$10,000.
to do his research for his degree, which I understand is not gonna come out of his work time, or am I wrong about that?
Right, it is not.
So
It
it
is
doesn't
not.
cost
I mean,
us anything.
There's always, there's some, that's correct. I mean, that's the expectation I have.
And I don't understand the next item, which is really the point of my question. Total district data gathering in-kind staff time. I mean, I gather, again, it's not an out-of-pocket expense, it is, we're gonna take we assume a certain amount of time for people to respond to some questions. And we're gonna spend $400.
Yeah,
Cash. Just so we're clear.
No, that's separate. That, the $400 is separate
Yeah.
from the, yeah,
Right.
okay,
Yeah, we're gonna use some staff time
yeah.
with an estimated value of $3,000, but that's spent money. If we don't do this, we're not gonna get the $3,000 back. So out-of-pocket expenses doing this is $400 for us.
So I have a question as well, is, first of all, I'm not sure if I'm following the chicken and egg argument of Rich or the bus before the cart before the horse argument.
Okay?
I think they both have some validity to them. But one question I have is, I mean, is this broader than just, is this looking at potential down the road, if we're busing kids from Winooski to Burlington or to South Burlington? I mean, is that kind of part of what this is, and I'm just not reading enough into this, that it's not just talking about AP courses and those kind of things, but it's broader, that there is kind of this other thing that's going on, which is very preliminary and very reluctant, I think, by all the districts in Chittenden County of looking at the Winooski study. I mean, is this kind of part of that? I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, I really want to have this transparent. Is that, maybe that's good, maybe it's bad, I don't know.
I'll be honest with you, I think, again, some of these ideas have come out of the desire for looking at how we are going to optimize opportunities for kids.
Right.
Clearly. So during my time here with WIN, that's been a conversation and a discussion. We've moved in my time to utilize, CCTA to help us with transportation for kids in and around the city and beyond. So it's definitely a component that I think is important for us to figure out.
For us to figure out what,
Well,
though?
I think it's important for us to know that in the not-so-distant future, and I don't know what time frame, 5 years from now, we are likely to, if enrollments continue on the trend that they're at, probably will have some difficulty continuing to support the number of programs at the high school, for instance. And those, I don't want to say what those might be, but, those are somewhere in that gamut of what we offer. However, I do think there's an efficiency that needs to happen, and that's likely to be the same case at Essex and Burlington and CVU, et cetera. So how are we going to ensure that opportunities can remain rich for kids, but do it in a more cost-effective way?
And that to me, David, is where the
That's-
assessment should start.
that's
It's-
right.
We
I
know
agree.
enrollment projections,
Right.
so start with enrollment,
Yep.
then marry up programs against that, and see where we've got some critical pressure points where programs are really at risk because of enrollment. And then we can follow with infrastructure requirements.
So I'm letting you know kind of my desired state is
Yeah.
that I, am mindful enough about our current financial metrics moving forward, and I recognize that I'm going to need, on your behalf, to be thinking differently around how to keep opportunities. So WIN certainly has been aware of that, and as a result of some of that knowledge has, I think fairly independently, although collaboratively with others, said, I think this may be an option, right? Part of the piece of the puzzle, if you will.
But is it?
Stuart has a point, I just wanted
Well-
to, before it gets lost.
Yeah, I said I didn't want to really say anything, but
But now you do.
one of the pieces, that's the red edition, but, I do think that a major part of this grant is the question of optimization of transportation, regardless of whether students go over to Burlington High School to take AP or vice versa. And I don't know where South Burlington fits in that pattern. Historically, like a district like Chittenden South looked at their Shelburne buses, because each school ran their own buses, and, said, well, this Shelburne bus really should take Williston kids to CVU because it goes through this street. And so, they could begin to optimize bus patterns as a separate city. In other words, I don't know how many times we go where Burlington kids are when our buses run, but I think that's part of what this software would do as well, is saying, where do buses go twice or three from different districts, or where if they went down a road this way and picked up 5 more kids and swung around here, it would save all the districts money in the long run. So I think it's important not to lose sight that there are two parts of this, you know, and one part is just that infrastructure and sharing of resources across districts, and does it make sense? So,
Would it look at, for instance, buses going to the islands or to Georgia, or is that part of the study? I mean, is there room for efficiencies operating with the other schools in Chittenden County for that bus run, for instance? And do we really need this whole study to answer that
I
question?
mean, part of this is the availability of software that's not readily available in certain places. So it basically can take, you know, the school-age children, and you're able to then utilize the power of the program and information that's available to look at kind of the mapping, if you, as Stuart highlighted, you know, on how many times you go around that particular loop. You've got 15 different loops that have happened to support two schools, and either CCTA buses or our buses or somebody else's buses have traveled. And so how can we as, consumers, whether we're South Burlington, be more efficient? So that's the optimization component. And again, what I identified is certainly the optimization around course benefit options, you know.
And just one final thing on that, even within our own district, right now, somebody thinks, okay, this bus going from Central, this is the most efficient route, and it may be, but this software would trick that route and say, actually, if it turned here and it turned there, you'd use less gas. I mean, I don't know that it will find out that would happen, but that's part of what this supposedly would be able to do.
So part of the study is just looking at South Burlington busing as well.
And everybody's buses, and it's just that together, yeah, I
So-
think that's the whole intent.
I have one bigger question as well. It kind of goes to the cart and horse and chicken and egg, is why, I mean, there hasn't been, I mean, we put these laptops in our schools. I've heard about virtual learning. I've heard about, all sorts of supposed opportunities and needing to work, and there's no grant like this that is looking at that. I mean, as far as I understand, is this where we should be spending our time, or should we be seeking, I mean, if this Act 156 grant is money that's available, are we not using it wisely by looking at this as opposed to looking at how we could actually use our investment?
Well, the idea of Act 156 is to look at mergers of districts and shared services for districts.
Right, that's exactly what I'm saying. Isn't that the more obvious or service that we should be serving, or sharing among everybody? Is
Well, now you lost me.
Well, I mean, the fact that we have laptops, the fact that there's one-to-one programs in other schools in Chittenden County as well, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we be looking at how to utilize our unique resources or teaching resources we may have, or Burlington may have, or Winooski may have, through the laptops? I know this is beyond the scope of what this is, but it's just, I see this, and is it the wrong apple that we're picking, to throw another?
There's a lot of,
We made a salad.
there's a lot of tentacles to this thing.
Out of metaphors.
Well, listen, I
Punchy already, and it's only 8:15.
I mean, I do feel that, Act 156, I mean, that's, as you said, Rich, it's exactly the intent of this Vermont money, is to look at ways in which we can look at ways to be more efficient. And so they offer those up. I think there's an awful lot of other essential questions that should be and can be teased out, whether this is the highest priority or not, and whether this leads to more in-depth conversations around virtualization and shared resources, whether we're teaching a class here for somebody there, and on the third day, then they come here, and then, whatever that may look like. Certainly, I'm very mindful and want to see that as an option for us. And Stuart knows that as we move forward, how are we going to continue to use the technology in the most developmental appropriate way? And that could include tying into some of these very verbose, very powerful programs that can help our students. So, anyway,
I don't hear a motion. There could be a motion to approve the grant. There could be a motion to reject the grant. If there's no motion, we'll continue to the next agenda. No motion, then we'll move on.
Okay, thank you.
Do I get kudos from their timekeeper for that?
Yes.
Good, good. I'll take all I can get. That takes us to asset protection.
And so it's in your packet. You got to search probably for it. There's been some changes that have been made and
Since the
highlighted.
program that was sent, since the draft that was sent to us?
Yes,
or-
and, okay.
Is there another job?
There,
The one that came, no.
it came in your packet.
Oh,
I believe, and Martin, I think you may help me, I think the one component that was added, page 8 of 8, I believe, Martin, do you think was the only change that we made from the
From
previous,
when's that?
from the last time it's appeared before the board?
Well, I think that you made.
More than that, yeah, we better go back. I think.
I mean, I've gone through them, I think most of these were issues that I had, and I didn't have any issue except with respect to the
My response.
number 10. And I did ask you a question, you did respond, and I still have a question.
So you want to tell us what that question is?
So I can jump ahead to that unless other people have something before.
Well,
that.
let me ask that question. Where is your question?
Number
Towards
10.
the end, it's a number, detail policy number 10.
8 of 8, on page 8 of 8.
So anything before detail policy number 10?
let's jump.
Okay. 8 of 8, Martin.
Right. All right, I understand the answer that you gave me. The question that I had was, under this policy, we're not to, among other things, endanger the organization's public image. And that you've interpreted that you will demonstrate that the staff conduct is legal, ethical, and prudent as related to the job performance. And then as evidence, you say, well, we have 4 employees who have faced discipline that was a result of conduct that was illegal, unethical, or not prudent. And you haven't gone the next step to say, and this is the way I asked it in the question, is the fact that you have used discipline on, or had discipline of these employees, is that sufficient to avoid the problem of endangering the organization's public image? I think you answered yes in the answer to this question, but I think you need to make that clear in the report itself.
Yeah.
So for future, I think it's important that you said that these were reported to the board in executive session, but I think you have to close the loop, so it's, in the end, kind of a narrow issue, and that is, I think you have to make very clear here that you believe the discipline has corrected the fact that you had 4 employees who had this kind of conduct.
So Martin, just so I understand what you're saying, if the report went on to say, and the employees were appropriately disciplined, you'd be satisfied?
Yeah, I think that probably, even saying it was appropriately disciplined. The other question I think I believe, if I recall, I raised is, is there something else going on here? Is there insufficient training where we continue to have this issue? So that's kind of why I want more of a statement to tell me that I shouldn't be worried about that. I want something a little more definitive. I mean, I don't want the superintendent to be proving all the negatives, but one that comes to mind is that if you have a systemic problem where you keep on having this issue, either with the particular individual or it has something to do with training, I want that at least to be said, yeah, that's not a problem. This discipline takes care of this.
Yeah, so, I mean, I just was trying to be, I wasn't trying to be vague. I was trying to not also box myself into providing more information than I should around this.
Right.
So I was kind of walking a fine line. I do think, I couldn't put in correct discipline was applied if that was true, and discipline can be anything from, dismissal to
It's a judgment
training.
call.
But,
Sure.
But
I think it's just a matter of saying that these sufficient actions were taken to avoid endangering the organization's public image. Something along that
Fine.
line.
I'm good.
And if we want to press you at that point, and I would ask,
Yeah.
I don't think because I know what these issues were, or vaguely remember them, and I don't think it reflected that there's a systemic problem or there's, a problem with training. I think that's the part that's kind of behind the scenes that we have to take up in the executive session.
Just to think a little bit about what you're saying, Martin, and with there only being 4 instances, I'm not sure this really follows. Let's say we had 40 employees who were disciplined over the last year.
Right.
I would want to know something I don't see in this report, which is, what's the nature of these problems? Because if we have 20 of the same thing, that would tell me we got a training problem, or we got some other systemic problem. we need to deal
But
with.
we've been told of the four.
But we know
and
what
we
the four
presumably
are.
would have
Get a
been
little
told.
chart, yeah.
So,
So I don't think there's a need to categorize
No.
the discipline with this low a number.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I don't think it's a problem. If it was only one, you know, does that self-identify, you know, a situation? I don't think so. Because I'm simply saying corrective actions, discipline actions have been applied.
No, I don't.
So. Anyway, I don't want to overthink it. I appreciate the feedback, Martin, and I think it's helpful. So we'll make the change and
So my question for you, Martin, is the representation that the change will be made enough to approve this report tonight?
think so.
Or do you want to see it?
I don't think, I mean, I suggest, I mean, if you're gonna use the language that,
Yeah.
you know,
Can I put in there?
sufficient actions, then I'm fine, as long as that's gonna go into the report.
so what I
no
put in the response to the question would be better than what I included in the,
Yeah,
to include that.
yeah, essentially just, yeah, correct.
It's good.
All right, so
Thank you, Martin.
if there is no objection, then the report on asset protection will be considered to be, will be accepted. Without objection, it's accepted, and I'll mark the chart in accordance with the report after the meeting.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And it does indicate to me that we're making some progress with this process, because we're looking at the same issues again and seeing what we want to see. I would make one other comment about this subject area, and say, I didn't want to make it as a condition of accepting the report, but I think the board should know more about the Visbit Trust than we know. I think somebody from Visbit ought to come to a meeting and explain to the board how this works and what these numbers mean, and you know, what the impact of $1 million loss from some other school district would have on us, and sort of that sort of thing. Because we do, by continuing with Visbit, you know, we're out of the commercial insurance market, and we need to know that that is an appropriate judgment for us to be making. So that's just my thought, David.
Okay. Certainly maybe now in the current state that we're in, with maybe more questions are out there than ever before with their kind of continued services.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I have no
Okay.
problem of seeing if they
Great.
can come and do that.
Great, all right. We're not gonna do, oh, we've already skipped past the school district calendar. That takes us to harassment of employees, policy D6. And the board has in front of it
Yeah,
a
let me,
revision of that policy.
yeah, let me just
or not-
highlight what they have. In your
Okay.
packet, you actually had kind of the first draft. That was in your packet. And then what you received at your, in the email was actually, I believe, a marked up version and then a cleaned up version. So you had the marked up one and then one that represents the clean version with those in there. So
So the one in our packet is old.
the one in your packet that came is old, which is what
Okay.
this one was worked from. So I think it might be most helpful to probably go from the marked up one.
Well, let
Or-
me make a little
or-
explanation
this
to the
is
board about the
assuming-
marked up one. And say that's the result of my personal
Feedback.
efforts. I didn't say this to you, David, but I meant to. I didn't have a Word version of the document, so I converted it from the PDF, so the formatting may not all have followed perfectly.
Yeah.
So that would obviously need to be dealt with. But the changes that I suggested really reflect three things, I think. One is, the largest thing, is consistent with, I think, the discussions that this board has had in the past, which is that our policy on harassment should not be limited to illegal harassment, that it would be broader than that, and it would apply to harassment, legal and illegal. That we would say, we don't want our employees to be harassed, even if it's legal for them to be harassed. So the bulk of what you see reflects my effort to come up with a policy against legal harassment. Let me put that a different way. Harassment that is within the boundaries of the law, that would be legally allowable, but that we don't want as a policy matter to have. I do think that in terms of looking at this, there are some implications to our doing that, in terms of our taking on more responsibilities than the law requires that we take on. I think the board, when we talked about this initially, wanted to do that. And I think it's a good thing for us to do. But it's something we want to do consciously, and now you have an opportunity to see what that would look like. The second set of changes that I made were really just linguistic in nature, just an effort to be a little more concise in some areas. And the third thing that it does is just to make clear the idea that if there's a complaint against the superintendent, that would go to the board chair. And that's just, I think it was implicit before, but that's the way that ought to work. So there are specifics here as well. I would say this to the board: I'm not the district's lawyer. I'm functioning really as a lawyer in terms of cleaning this document up in this way. I shouldn't be the board's lawyer. I shouldn't try to be. I won't try to be. If the board wants to move in the direction, the policy direction, of saying, yes, we're going to have a policy that provides our employees with more protection than what the law requires, then a lawyer who represents the district should look at this and say, this is good, this is bad, here's how it should be changed. So that's why I did what I did.
I had one question that, where we, I think, kicked off the rewriting of this policy, was initially that it only covered harassment and didn't cover discrimination.
Right.
And I noticed that now we don't have discrimination in here at all in the policy, and what, do we need to do that
I
still?
did think about that, and I went to the website and looked at our other policy governance policies, which require that our employees be treated in accordance with the law. So I think that they do prohibit discrimination from that perspective, and in order to avoid this becoming too multifaceted and too confusing, it does not prohibit discrimination. It prohibits a form of discrimination because illegal harassment is a form of discrimination. And we have to have a policy on that because the law requires that we have a policy on harassment.
Right.
So that's why school districts and other employers have harassment policies,
Right.
because the law says you have to.
All right, well, then we're, and I don't have the latest iteration of the 2.2 report, then something in the 2.2 report is going to have to be modified, because as evidence of compliance, and I'm looking at a 2.2 report, but it's older, and I can't find the connection, but there was evidence that essentially was pointing to a policy on discrimination, and there isn't any policy. So
I
that
think there
part has
is.
to be,
I think there is a policy on discrimination.
well, then it was never shown, because I asked, well, I said, well, I need to see, well, what are you pointing, you're saying you have complied with this one part of 2.2 by pointing employees to this policy on discrimination. Well, I'd like to see, I don't see the policy on discrimination. You're pointing them to harassment policy,
Yeah.
not discrimination. So I'd have to look again at that, and I think my point way back when we first
Either
looked
to
at this
clear up-
was either to clear up
that or
that
add it.
policy, or change the harassment policy, which is the route that we took, and it sounds like it's a little bit different. But as far as this right here, I think it's fine, and I like the idea that we're trying to provide more protection.
I will say that I wasn't able to open the document. I didn't get it until this afternoon, so I haven't looked at it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
I haven't read it either.
So the question, I think, becomes for the board, whether you want to send this off to council to look at, or you want to wait until you've had a chance to look at it more carefully before you say, we'll send it off to council to look at it. Legal counsel, that is.
You know,
That's for you.
I'd be inclined to send it to council, although it still needs a little bit of cleanup. It's I see a few formatting issues in here. But I'd be inclined to send it off because I think it's going in the direction that we intended. And we do have to address your issue though, Martin.
Yeah,
Those will be
and we'll look again. I don't know, I cannot recall where again, that's how it started, that's how this review started, the discrimination component, and so let me make sure that was not lost.
Yeah, I just
I
couldn't
think
find
And
there's
it's
it
a
corrected,
updated-
before.
Yeah.
and it's corrected somewhere.
Okay.
I need to just make sure of that, because
Yeah.
that was the initial charge.
And if you can have the latest 2.2 monitoring report sent out, so I can, well, I'd like to look at it again and see
Mhm.
how to address that part of it.
Yep.
Okay.
But I'd be okay if this gets sent to the attorney, but it sounds like, you know, if Diane or Julie have a big issue in the next couple of days to maybe get a hold of David and say, wait.
Fair enough.
Sure, and I don't know why I was able to open other documents, but that one I couldn't open on my computer, so I just asked if I could have it sent in another way, format, whatever.
Has that happened, Diane,
That
yet or not?
probably reflects that
It
it
wasn't
came
until
from.
this afternoon.
So you don't
and
know if you've been
I
able
to-
don't- Yeah, I don't know.
I think, I bought a up-to-date computer recently, and it may just be a more advanced version of Word than works on your computer. I don't know.
We can make sure, if you
Nancy
can't open it,
on.
let us know.
Sorry.
Thank you for the work.
It was fun, sort of. That takes us to draft board meeting evaluation.
Yes, and I know both Diane and Elizabeth and I met briefly. I know both of them worked to put some information together
Have a
around,
document?
really providing, I think, some clarity around kind of board and evaluations of meetings, et cetera. So I'll turn it over to Diane and Elizabeth for kind of an overview and any questions.
Yeah, the back page that you have is the current self-evaluation form, and one is the board meeting evaluation, and then the other is the board meeting relative to the superintendent's role and shall not cause or allow the board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. So those are the two that we currently use. And what Diane and I kind of walked through, and it certainly isn't comprehensive, but it was really to combine kind of an assessment of how the actual meeting went and how the board's doing its job. So that's the board meeting evaluation. You see the first set of 7 bullet points there. And we thought it might make sense to have a more succinct rating system, just kind of agree, disagree, or no opinion. And also that we wanted the evaluation to reflect, real life issues that we either want to stop, start, or continue. The second part, relative to the superintendent feedback, we felt was pretty unactionable as it currently existed. So we recoined this superintendent feedback as an effort to give David some feedback on how the board felt it was prepped for deliberations and how it set the tone for moving forward. And then we had a recommendation from a board member that whether or not we should use the self-evaluation in public at the start of the following meeting. And the pros and cons that might be worth some discussion here would be that we'd all have to keep and bring notes to the subsequent meeting. And some of the public would hear that assessment process, but not necessarily those that had attended the meeting which was being reviewed. So I won't get into a lot of the detail in each of these, but we tried to incorporate what we felt were the real salient points from the current assessment form, but added some that addressed our interest in including or that supported our directional achievement of ends, and we added a comment for discussion whether or not we should add to that at a cost the community could afford, so that we're kind of continuing to talk about that. That we were moving issues from the parking lot to future meetings, and that we actively include staff, students, and community members in our discussion and in future meeting agendas, so that in our efforts to connect with our various stakeholders, that we're holding ourselves accountable to that. So I'll stop there. Diane, did you have anything else?
No, that's good. I especially like the idea of the succinct rating system, because to have an agree or strongly agree, I don't know how meaningful that is, versus an agree or a disagree. So I think that means more to me. So we'd love to hear what people think about it.
Comments?
I thought it was good. I liked the questions that you're having us ask of ourselves much better than what we've been asking, certainly. I did have a couple questions. In the board focus and deliberations were in support of directional achievement of its ends. Directional achievement seems a little jargony to me. I'm not sure if I exactly know what you mean by that. You know, I think just support of achievement of its ends makes more sense to me. But I had a bigger question on the added cost that the community could afford. I know that comes right from our ends, and I think it's appropriate there in the ends. But the way I envision that is we kind of find that out with our feedback loop to the community with the budget. And for on a daily basis, we're not gonna have that feedback loop. So maybe it's as simple of a change as making it very clear that at a cost we believe the community, could afford. Because we can't have any kind of definitive judgment, I think, on a daily basis on unless we have an economist commenting and giving us lots more data than we get. So that, and the one other question I had was in the last item under the board evaluation. The board actively included staff, students, and community members. And from a policy governance perspective, is inclusion of staff, is that really our prerogative? I suppose if we want staff there, yes, we can have staff there, but is that, just in the policy governance, is that, don't we defer to David to bring the staff he needs to answer our questions?
Yeah, I think the reason to include that is because we have continued to talk about linkage with all our stakeholders. So it was really, obviously, David, it'll be your purview to include staff, but I think the board, from my perspective, is the board holding itself accountable to include all stakeholders. So it isn't necessarily in all discussions, but it may be in future meeting agendas where we've asked, for instance, for topics to be included, like tonight, the CDC, as an example. So we've invited really staff in to talk about that through David.
Could you add something like, at the end, future meeting agendas at the discretion of the superintendent? Would that meet that? So that it leaves it
I'm not
up
sure
to
that we-
David to invite people and,
Well, that seems to be a little contradictory to the board actively including staff.
And I do think one thing that we've communicated to David is that we went through a period of time when we weren't seeing staff here. And we concluded that although that might be consistent with the policy governor approach, that we have one employee, the superintendent, that it did not make for good relations between us, the board and the staff.
Sure.
And so we decided that, yeah, we want to continue to approach this from a policy governance perspective, but we do want staff to understand that we're interested in what they do and interested in them as people.
Well, absolutely. I
So
don't
it is
have a
something we want.
problem with including staff. I'd like to see staff at every one of the meetings. It's just,
It's
I
really how
want
it's
to raise that
worded.
flag to make it clear that we're being conscientious in making that decision here, understanding that it's not necessarily
Well, and by way of
pure policy
example,
governance.
if we look at a year's worth of assessments and we found that we were rating ourselves inadequately or disagree on this more often than not, then to me, that would be a signal that it hasn't had the priority that we intended.
when I think about the items that we put on future agendas, for some of those, we need staff as part of those
Yeah.
reports. And so when we hear the reports and if we see that the people that are directly involved aren't participating in the discussion, then we didn't do very well in that area.
I mean, you could be, when staff, students, community members are present, the board works to actively, engage or whatever, as they come through different things, but, I understand, It's more about whether we understand it, and I think what I often say is if we all went away, would
The next group.
future board members know what that means? And if there's clarity that's needed, then we should provide clarity, or if it's perfectly clear, then leave it alone. But I'd look at it through that lens. If you were a new board member, would this say, I have to act, we should be actively inviting people, or,
That's a better request.
Yeah.
As far as, if I can go on to the superintendent feedback component of it, I again thought that those were better areas of inquiry, but one thing that this does is it takes away our monitoring of, the questions we're currently asking comes right out of our policy governance.
Yeah, I know.
And so if we're asking these questions, then we have to separately, I would think, on an annual basis or some periodic basis, have to go back and check.
Yeah.
Either that or we need to change the policy, to reflect the questions that we're now asking of David.
Yeah, and I think the feeling I know that I had is that it's more difficult to evaluate this with every meeting. This might be more of an
Right.
annual review,
Right.
but these questions could be evaluated at each meeting.
Right, yeah, I agree.
They're at a
We
more
just can't
granular
lose,
level than those questions.
right, we just can't lose that, we need to do the
Yeah,
other.
we do, we still would need to, yeah.
So from an action perspective, I'm sorry, Julie, it looks like
I
you
just have,
something
I just
else.
have one question. So I just wonder, David, when you get this feedback on the back page, if one of us disagrees with you, which I know occasionally happens, but then there's this lull about like who's disagreeing and what's the real issue. I mean, but if it's gonna be, if it's gonna be
feedback,
positive, if it's gonna
disagree.
be good feedback, I
It's
think you
good.
kind of need to know what it is.
Well,
And
Yeah.
right, and I think you lose that.
Well, I did talk to Diane and Elizabeth about that. I think
Okay.
that, in the process of continuous improvement, it would be helpful. I mean, it's one thing to be marked on it, but if it doesn't lead to more specific information, I mean, obviously, I get some of it, I put information, last minute on the agenda. I mean, I can,
Whichever one of us
I-
is
no,
glaring
no, I-
at you.
No, but that's a truth, that's a truth.
Well, we
and
could
that-
just sign the report.
What we do?
Well,
but
we
it's a connection,
do, but we
yeah.
don't always say what the issue is.
So,
That's
no,
what I
I
think
don't,
about how
I think if there's
meaningful
clarity
is
there,
its
that's
scale.
helpful,
Okay, okay.
Can I ask what people think about if we were to keep this and do it on an annual basis? This one, would you still want to use that 5-point scale, or could we do the other?
No.
Agree, disagree, or no opinion, and then a place for comments that specifically say what the area is?
I think you
about.
get more meaningful responses from people if you force them to make
written.
a judgment.
Agree,
The
strongly
sort of
agree.
strongly agree, it's a way of sort of hedging the decision.
How about 1 to 5 stars?
Yeah.
We're all used to that nowadays.
Well, I do think the comment, I've got to believe the comments would be helpful for you. If we say, yeah, you didn't tell us that CAX was going to call us, that's, right, whatever it is. Okay, I think,
Agree, disagree, no opinion, and then comments.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I would suggest we do the larger, the current report at least twice a year.
Twice a year. And then how about the idea of doing this at the start of the next meeting or the end of the current meeting?
They both have problems.
It's going to be hard to go to
Yeah.
the next meeting and think about, right?
Yeah.
To recall.
The recall is going to be tough.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll work.
Let me throw out one other option, and this is not a good one either.
Electronic.
That we email it to Delina or Meg to, like, the next day, within 24 hours or something. Because I will be
Electronic?
frank that by end of the meeting,
You're tired.
the input's not that great. And 2 weeks later, I don't remember what happened.
Yeah, but then it puts it on Delina and Meg to call us and say, hey, you didn't turn in your thing.
It's just an email.
Well, the real downside is if we want the public to kind of witness any part of a board self-evaluation process.
Yeah.
That
So
transparency.
I don't think we've impressed anybody with it.
Well, but they know that you're doing it,
I'm
and,
sure some people
you're
stay
holding-
to see us beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. But I mean, coming back at the next meeting, unless were here the meeting before.
doesn't have a lot of meaning.
Yeah. Well, maybe what we should consider then is sort of a summary report that might get published once or twice a year as well, that kind of is on the
Captures.
website for a little while,
a good
that is a
idea.
board self-evaluation.
Well, these could even be put on the web as part of the, I don't know. Our evaluations could be made available.
Well,
I don't think anybody's staying for the evaluations. Dan, do you ever stay for the evaluations?
What?
I was just saying, Dan stays around for the board evaluation component.
I provide that every weekend.
Goes our own. That's a nice point. All right, fair enough.
I wonder too, is there a place for having sort of a community version of this, just to kind of keep for people who come to meetings that might want to give us some feedback
Feedback process.
about how we're
from the
doing?
community.
I feel like we get that.
I got one yesterday.
I get it.
All right, I mean, we get it in email, but.
I get it on the phone, I get it in email. Do you? I mean.
Well, but I mean, how we're doing, I get that how we're doing overall, but I'm talking about in terms of our process.
Yeah.
We may believe that we're all doing something a certain way. What does everyone else think about our process? So
Yeah.
this is an evaluation of our process too, you know? I don't know, that
Yeah.
having people witnessing our meeting might be good feedback to get. Just a thought.
I mean, we can dial into some of the policy governance processes and experiences that are out there. It's likely that you are not alone in the desire for tweaking or making this more succinct. I'm happy to ask, what other, what are others doing around kind
So
of the collection
shall I
process?
send a revised version back to you maybe, David?
That would be great.
And then you can maybe
Ask
see
some.
what's out there, yeah.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Be great.
And as far as having the public sort of comment on these issues, if we had a regularly engaged group of people, a lot of people, I think it'd be worthwhile, but pretty small.
Well, we don't know how many people.
They're very
involved in
important, though.
RETN as well. I
No,
mean,
we don't. That's true.
So-
And that's been an effort by the board to have all of our ears taped. So again,
Yeah.
I think you have a lot of
Hadn't thought
folks
of
that
that.
do, and the other paper, folks that are watching and listening in different facets.
The only
I don't-
thing I'll observe is this. I don't think we'll get very many comments about these issues. I think if we make a decision that is controversial, for example, we did not, but the superintendent decided not to close school yesterday. There
you
will
were
be
having-
people who disagree with you, and they will use this to let you know
By
that
show
they
of
do.
hands, by show of hands, how many people heard about it?
And by the way, I think the superintendent made the right decision. Dan, did you want to make a point?
I was just going to say, another possibility for getting comments from the public would be that you have these meetings recorded,
Yeah.
they're available to other people. I suspect that there are other people who watch those. There may be a way that you could ask, in the context of that, for feedback on the meeting. Maybe at the end, say, if you have comments on this meeting or at the beginning, and just,
That's a good idea.
how
Please
to
go
make
to-
those comments.
Yeah.
And I think you may want them shared across the board, and you do have that email address that broadsides the board.
Oh, yes. All right, so the bottom line here is you're going to
Modify these with
modify the
input.
questions really in light of the conversation we've had
And
this
I'll
evening?
put down some of the recommendations that were made.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to setting the agenda for our April 3 meeting. We have a draft agenda here.
Yep.
And our future agenda items list is becoming very long. I note that.
Can we take anyone off there now?
Yeah, what can we take off there?
Well,
I'm gonna-
we added the audit suggestions to it.
Yeah.
Well, I would suggest that the audit issue ought to come up very promptly, like next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, the climate committee's coming next week, so we can take that off, right?
You will be able to, yeah.
And as far as the form-based code zoning thing, I'm gonna give you occasional updates on an as-needed basis, which means I don't know that you necessarily have to have it on the future agenda items. It's when something comes up that
We've
I
kind
think
of
the board
engaged
should
in
be
that.
informed of. I will talk to David and get on the
Yep.
agenda.
Okay.
So I think you can actually take that off.
Community linkage video?
That,
We did that
act-
already.
Well, we've really essentially, we used components of that when we did our budget piece, so now we should take it and reconvert it. But we also have other pieces that we want to add a little bit, I think, around that. But I think we should have that up and available, and we have a little more work to do on it, to transition it back to the community linkage, take out some of the budget information. So we should leave it on. It's
We
gotta
had
get
talked
Okay.
about possibly doing a retreat to.
Yes, we did. And I
Where did
haven't.
we leave that?
We didn't come up with any common date, and so, and I haven't pushed out anything of inquiry back to you either, but it's still a possibility. So the April 3rd meeting is the one that I'm not at, and so that was in part why we put on here, big picture, which Patrick will be here. The Climate Committee as well are both high school pieces. And so I think that, you'll be fine to have this continue forward. I will come up with a better plan on whether we push a retreat date out to you, modify the list, as we just said with Martin, and on some of the future pieces.
One thing I just want to bring up is that, Dan has talked to us before, and we talked about it as a group about having our students be a little more active in
Yeah.
our meetings. And one of the things in my spare time when I'm watching other board meetings,
Yeah.
was watching CBU the other night, and they have the student give a little weekly report, which I thought is nice. It's really what's happening at school this week, the last couple weeks, what's going on, and it's. I think it's a good interaction.
My issue with that is that sometimes they're not here, and so, but I think if they are here, it ought to be just so noted when, maybe just before comments from the public, we ask them, and it can be tied to announcements at the end, but obviously, when we get to the end,
No, I think
often
we
we
should
want
do
to
it at the
dismiss them.
beginning, yeah.
So I think we can just put it in right before comments and questions from the public, or right after information, that's just from the student reps.
I would hope that our student reps would want to do that, but it isn't quite what they signed up for,
Right.
so then we ought to ask them.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd have a problem. I think it's right to ask and to be clear about what the purpose is, and that's really the happenings in the school,
Well, and
things you'd
they,
like to
they
share.
do need to prepare for it. And they're,
Yeah.
the few times we've asked, I do think it catches them a little off guard, because they'll, top of mind is what they're involved in, but there's a lot of other things going on.
Yeah.
So
Fine, let's
ask
check
them,
into
and
that.
if that's agreeable, we'll put it on the agenda right. I'm just thinking, right before comments from the public?
Or right before David's report.
Right before David's report.
Yeah.
Does you think that makes more sense,
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, but I was just trying to be mindful of time, and that's early in the agenda,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and if there's a big crowd, on comments and things from the public, it might be better to have.
See what they
that.
think. See what they think. They seem pretty confident. I think they'll be willing, but I do want to ask them.
Yeah, and again, we currently have kind of a hierarchy here. We have both, senior and a junior in this case, so it could be kind of a shared duty.
Okay. Any other changes that we want to make in this April 3rd report, agenda? Okay.
The calendar will be on here, and that, so that needs to be added. I apologize. The calendar will be part of this, and Stuart will be presenting that for me. We were very close to having it ready today, but not quite there, so there are a few other things we're working on.
All right.
Okay?
Takes us to item 14, minutes of the March 6th meeting. Are there comments or questions or proposed changes in the March 6th minutes?
March 6th.
I think, just before the election results, you should probably note that I left the meeting.
And
Yes, you did.
And in the election results, you may want to note that Diane and I actually prevailed. I felt a little.
Overcoming stiff opposition.
I felt a little left out, and I was wondering, did David just pass us by? And I actually went on REPN to confirm that. In fact, he did congratulate the two
No,
board
he did.
members for
I
having
heard
prevailed.
that.
So I think you need to, in fact, put that on.
So which one are we on, the March
Sixth.
6th? Martin. and
March 6th.
It's just in the
Election
organization of the
results.
board. Okay.
Yeah,
You see
Although
that,
the
Meg?
election results, I think, is where you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? With that change, if there's no objection, the March 6 minutes will be deemed to be approved. And that takes us to the March 13.
Yeah, Dina Atwood was not present, so she needs to be taken off.
Oh, yeah. That's my mistake.
Thank you. Oh, we were getting dead. No, we wouldn't get that anyway. Anything else? Without objection, the March 13 minutes will be deemed to be approved. Even though it says March 11 in the agenda, but it means March 13. That takes us to the consent agenda, and do, as was mentioned, have a couple of returns.
Yeah, and you have that one addition.
Both of whom are long-serving.
Yeah, and I just would like to
teachers,
mention them, and Julie Graham, longtime literacy and reading recovery teacher.
work.
And, just, when you talk about those connections with students around really the foundation of the importance of reading and literacy, I can't say enough positive things. And she's continued to pass along that kind of love for that work. And similarly, Barb Lawrence from Orchard, for working with young children, kindergarten, first and second grade over her years, has been also, affected a lot of lives. And so, these decisions to retire, as the board has so mentioned before, are often not easy ones, but they've given a lot. So, again, just so recognized.
We will accept them as presuming that the consent agenda passes with appreciation for their long service to the district. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with that notation?
So moved?
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved.
And I'm assuming you'll be okay if I send a letter on your behalf?
Please.
Congratulate, and.
Thank you.
could we back up to nutrition services? Can you note that you got a letter and that it's been accepted?
Oh, thank you. Yes, yeah, just from.
I
a-
just forgot about that.
Yes, I forgot it as well. And I would note for the record that we did have a letter about nutritional services from a member of the city council, Roseanne Greco, and we thank her for her input. So I appreciate, Martin, you reminding me
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
a good catch.
Yeah. There's nothing to say about the accounts receivable, accounts payable orders. That takes us to announcements.
You have in your announcements, you have your announcements at your side. And then what did I do with my other things here? No, I have mine. I wanted to ask, yeah, that's good. You. All right, so I know that you have that in front of you, but just for the folks that are watching, South Burlington High School band students will compete in the state band competition on March 28th in New York City. And Vermont State History Bowl and B happened, and we were victorious in that on Saturday. Eric Stone and a whole bunch of volunteer advisors captured that title, so congratulations to them. You heard this earlier from Patrick on Nancy Lavarnway being selected to the Senate Committee on Committees to serve the State of Vermont Commission on Women Committee beginning March 13th. A lot of committee in there. Congratulations, obviously, to the boys hockey team that made it all the way and became state champion. And that was the first time in the Division I category. Last time, I think, was 1994 or 5. I may have that wrong. I hope people don't hear that wrongly, but I think it was 94, 95 when they were Division II state champions. So it's been a while. So congratulations to all of them around that. I wanted to just highlight a couple other things. I mean, part of what I'm trying to do, announcements actually will be posting on our website, and Delina and Meg actually do a good job for me in making sure that's available. So I want to kind of point our announcements actually to a lot of the things that are under news on our webpage. And currently on the webpage, we have the kindergarten registration that's important to us. Chamberlain has dates there, so April is a busy month. April really 9th through the 12th is for registrations for moms and dads looking to register their kindergartners. And I want to just let them know that, and they can go to our website or call us, and we'll make sure they get the information and the date to set up that registration. The preschool, we're looking for some role models, and that's again, an announcement I think is important to mention as we progress into our support program. Mentoring, there's some dates on there that are upcoming. Again, many, many dates, and this is, the PACT folks have been setting up these wonderful series of information, and there's some that are coming up on Thursdays, March 14th, 21st, 28th, and 4th. And again, all of that information is on our website. This is the same place where we had all of our budget information, and it appears where you can click to get more information. So I would strongly encourage folks, if they have questions, to go to that, or if they don't have the ability to go to our website, to please give us a call on those areas. So that's all I have.
All right,
Thank you.
with that is,
Excuse me.
yes.
I also want to mention, in case you hadn't heard, that our math counts team here at the middle school was
yeah,
the
thank
state champions.
All right.
And one of the students was number 2 in the state, will be going to Washington. One is the first alternate as 5th. The first 4 go, so if one of the 4 can't go, we'll have 2 students who'll get to go to Washington.
Thanks for mentioning
While we were
that,
the
Stuart.
state champions, so.
And like I always say, there's so many things going on that they're missed, and thanks for those notes.
I just want to mention too, Junior Iron Chef is next Wednesday.
Junior
and
Iron Chef.
Nutritional Services will be providing a lasagna dinner. We'll have beef lasagna or a gluten-free veggie lasagna. And it's going to be a fundraiser to help Nutritional Services deficit.
That's next Wednesday
Next Wednesday
at all the
night.
schools or one of the schools?
At the middle school.
The middle school.
From 5 to 6. And you will also get to see all the meals that the middle school students have
Yeah.
prepared.
So
Thank
we,
you.
just make sure that we get that. We can push out some information on the website. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
and it's $4 for students, $7 for adults, and $20 for a family.
Great.
And it will be a reimbursable school meal.
All right. Good thinking, Evan.
Take an apple with it, right?
All right, so with that, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
I
We are adjourned